Hello and welcome everyone. We are now on part 3 of this brush studio video. So again, if you haven't noticed, this is part 3. There were 2 parts before this about the brush studio, so if you haven't seen those, I recommend watching those first. But I had to kind of split these up because especially that first one was very long and I wasn't going to be able to get through all the categories within a reasonable amount of time, so I decided to split them up. And if this is the first video you're watching from me in the Procreate for Beginners series, so this is not only a part of the Brush Studio series, it's part of a bigger series which is Procreate for Beginners. And I started that a couple months ago from when this is filmed and uploaded. But I've gone through a lot of the categories to kind of do a deep dive on them. So there's a bunch of videos in that series, and there's a few more that's going to come out after this. But we're getting close to the end. But all of those videos will be in my Procreate and Digital Art playlist. So you'll want to watch that if you want to get, the full experience. And soon after this video, we're going to have a few more videos in that series I have to go through. But soon after that, we're going to start doing projects where you're going to take all, a bunch of different concepts together, where we've been working on them kind of separately, deep diving into them. You're going to start seeing a little more practically how you would use these things. So those are coming soon. We're getting there. Those will all be in that playlist though, so you'll want to find that playlist. I'm going to link it, but you can look for it on my profile page as well on YouTube. My channel page, I should say. But all of those videos will be in that playlist and all the ones that come afterwards as well. So you'll want to save that if you like my teaching style and want to keep learning. So let's get started with this video. Alright, welcome to part 3 now. We're almost there. Okay, so now we're going to go over, just to show you, the dynamics, Apple Pencil properties. Materials has to do with 3D, but we'll go over that real quick. And about this brush categories. So this is going to be part 3, so again, all these down here. So I'm going to actually change the brush that I'm using because I want something that's not pressure sensitive to show you this dynamic stuff, because otherwise it might mess things up. So I'm going to go into monoline, go back into dynamics. Now, let's see, I'm going to increase the preview size a little bit. I can probably keep it white, that's fine. Yeah, okay. I'm just gonna clear this out. So, all right. So speed and jitter, you see you have speed and jitter here. So speed is gonna have to do with how fast you make your strokes. So in order to show you, I'm going to put very slow, maybe even slower line here, and a really fast one, another really fast one. So what this is doing is, if you increase it, you can kind of see towards the end there that the size is getting smaller the faster I go. So I kind of started out a little bit slower and I went fast. I'm going to do that again. So I'm going to slow, fast, fast, slow. I don't know if that works because I'm used to, I don't know if I can do fast, slow. Anyway, but the faster I go towards the end there is it's getting smaller. So you can do the opposite. If you go this way, the faster you go, the bigger it gets. So this has to do with, again, speed that you're doing, and it's changing all those shapes. So I'm going to actually show you a little bit. If I space this out, you can see a little bit easier how those circles are getting bigger the faster I go. Because I kind of start out slow when I go fast, same as I did here. And these were just slow, so they're just the same size here. Going back to dynamics. And if we did it the other way, these were just big. It started out big and it's just big. And then the faster I go, the slower it gets. So that is how that changes there. Now this is going to do with opacity. So the more transparent, the more fast to go, the more transparent it'll be if you turn it this way. But it's in the opposite way this way. So unless you start really going fast, you're not going to see anything. So that is that. Now, size jitter is going to randomize the size of your shapes that you use in your pencil. And again, because we space these out, show you what it kind of looks like if you don't space them out. But you get that kind of weird texturized look because all the shapes are different sizes. So it's a little rough. And this is obviously changing all the way to the smallest possible circle you can make. But if you make it a little, it's not as dramatic. Like it's like a little texturized along the edges because the shapes are a little bit different, but they're not as bad. But if you make it, randomize all the way up, then it's going to get very small in parts. So it's going to be very chunky and choppy. And then you can do the same with opacity. So this might be hard to see in a thick line like this. Yeah, so you see when they're out, spaced out a little more, that some of them are more opaque than others. And again, you can change. But that's what those have to do with, basically how fast you're going, or just random, like the stamp shapes in your brush. That's what this category has to do with. So I know there isn't much here. All right, so I am in the monoline brush again. Going to go to Apple Pencil. We're going to start changing a little bit. So this again, these are specific to the Apple Pencil. So any other stylus, even if it does have pressure sensitivity, you're not going to be able to do, I don't think you're going to be able to change these because these are Apple Pencil specific. So I might be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure that that's what that means. So things that you can change, I've been over, but been over this, but you can change the pressure and the tilt with your pencil. And then there's a few other things down here. But first we're going to look at pressure again. So this is kind of stuff you do with pressure. So increasing the size here, I do to max. So this was the one I made with light pressure. This one I made with heavier pressure. And then this one I'm kind of varying as I go. And the size is increasing. If it's going this way, it's increasing with more pressure. And if you go the opposite way, it's going to do the opposite thing. So more pressure and it's going to get smaller. So this is like no pressure or like very, very light pressure. This is heavy pressure. This was light, heavy, light, heavy, light. So it's changing the shape based on the pressure you're using. And the opacity is going to change the opacity. So light has barely any opacity there, and dark is not. Yes, dark is going to make it completely opaque. This is more transparent. It doesn't go all the way to 0, but it's more transparent. And then you can see some of that here with the lighter pressure, and then opaque, and then a little bit more transparent, and then opaque. So that's what that does. And again, you can vary the amount of opacity difference you want, and you can do both size and opacity as well if you want. So then flow is, it's kind of like opacity, but this is basically how much paint is on your brush based on how much pressure you're putting, which is not really anything you can do in the real world, I don't think. But like on digitally, is something you can change if you want. So sliding it all the way this way, anything light is going to have like barely any paint on the brush, but then if you change pressure, all of a sudden you will have paint on your brush magically. And then you can do the opposite as well. So you have a lot of paint on your brush, the less pressure you have, and then this might be a little more real world. Like if you started off with a little bit of paint anyway, light pressure, and then like the more pressure you put on your paintbrush, the more paint is not on your brush. So that is what that has to do. It's, again, it's kind of similar to opacity, except you can get a little bit more transparent with flow if you want. Then bleed has to do with like how it's bleeding into the paper or canvas, whatever you're using. Again, this is digital, so, but like if you wanted to pretend you're drawing on paper, which you can do, you can get like watercolor paper textures and stuff, or other kind of textures. But this is how it's bleeding into that canvas or whatever you're using based on the pressure. So heavy pressure is always going to give you like just putting it all down there. But then light pressure, you can kind of change very subtly how much it's bleeding into the paper, or again, canvas, whatever you're making. So that's what that has to do with. So those are all pressure things. The next is going to be tilt. We're going to talk about all those next. Clear this out. All right, so for tilt, I am going to, this has to do with the angle that you're using your pencil at. So I'm going to draw a few strokes on here with different tilts. So the first one here is 90 degrees-ish. Like straight up and down. This one I'm gonna make, I don't have a protractor, I don't know exactly what tilt that is, but like 60 to 70, 45-ish to the iPad, and then closer to flat. And we're gonna see kind of the differences here. So first of all, this graph is kind of the threshold that all these things can change. So right now it's 0. That means that this can change at anywhere above 0. But if you move this up, it's going to affect these differently. Because I don't know the exact angle, because again, I have a protractor out here to see exactly how angled it was, but like this was supposed to be like 45-ish or like halfway in between, and this was supposed to be like 60 to 70 the second stroke, and then this one is 90. So I'm gonna leave it at 0 for now and then kind of see if anything changes. So this is going to change the opacity, and you can see that one down there is kind of changing because that one was like close to 0. But if you increase this angle here, it's going to start changing the other ones a little bit, but not much. But anyway, so that's going to change the opacity of your strokes with the tilt of your pencil. Gradation is going to change I don't know if this is easy to see vertically. Getting it more flat horizontally, you can kind of see a little more. I'm not seeing much of a difference here with the graph, but except for like the very flat ones versus the ones that are like this. The gradation is supposed to give you kind of a, like if you think of a pencil and how you would draw with a pencil, if you're more flat, you can kind of get that kind of textured, shaded look, rather than if you're drawing it straight up and you get that like the point of the pencil, where it's not only thinner but also like more opaque with a pencil, rather than if you kind of go against the flat like this, like you were shading in with a pencil. That's what gradation kind of does. And it probably is easier to see on a different brush on Procreate. I have the monoline brush right now. But that's what that does. Then bleed. Like these are, it's already at max, but it's hard to see. Yeah, you can kind of see if you zoom in real close. Maybe I can do that with the video. It's a little bumpy along the edges here because it's kind of bleeding into, again, the paper or whatever you're using as your canvas. But it's all with the edges there, how they kind of bleed into the paper. And then there's size, which is going to change the size of your shapes as the angle changes. So versus, like it's a little bigger this way, the flatter it gets, and there's not much difference of a size, and that might be also because I had this size compression on, so that's something, if you turn that off, it's going to make it very big, and like a difference with it being flat versus 90 degrees-ish to the screen. You can kind of see a much bigger difference here. But if you put size compression on, it's going to make it not as dramatic between the differences. There is a little bit of a difference you can see with size. And it also has to do with the texture. This doesn't really have any texture. But if you were to change the grain into something, I guess I can do that real quick. Change it into something that has a little more texture to it. You can kind of see flat versus going back to where we were at Apple Pencil. You can see like with this size compression on, it's kind of compressing that texture as well as the size. And with it off, it's leaving it the same. Like that's what one of the big differences is, other than like the general size. So again, this is very, like these are very subtle. It depends on the other kind of things that you're changing within the pencil as well. But those are all changed with the tilt of your pencil. That's what those are supposed to do. I'm going to go back and change this back to where it was. Blank. Okay. So that is that. I'm going to clear this out. Now the next sort of things down here, cursor outline. So that, right now it has no cursor. All right, so cursor outline, this isn't going to show very much on the drawing pad, I don't think. So I'm going to go out to the canvas, show you a few things now. Pay attention. I'm going to explain it, but try to pay attention as I'm drawing. All right, so that was monoline. I'm going to show actually a different type of brush as well. This crystals one. It's on none right now. Contrast. And then active color. All right, so if you noticed, as I was drawing those, this is like the thing it's showing you a cursor as you're going along. So if you have it on none, it's not showing anything. If you have it on contrast, it's showing you the shape, but like outlined in black, because it's showing you a contrast of the color that you're using. And then if you have it on active color, you couldn't really see it on monoline because they're all the same and it's all the same opacity and everything. But on the crystals one, you could see it was sort of showing you that shape as it's going along in the active color. So I'm going to do it again because that's the one it's on. So you can see that shape is going around as you're going along and showing you how it's going to stamp the next one, basically. So this is like a cursor that you can see on the canvas. So basically, if you want that on or not is how you change that, or why you would change that. So then going back into monoline, that's what those did. And again, this is only something you can do with Apple Pencil. And just to explain, you have to make sure that your settings, if you go to settings, preferences, brush cursor has to be on, and advanced cursor settings, you have to have per brush. So that will show you, you can change it per brush, each brush that you make. This is something I'm going to go over more in miscellaneous, but that's what you have to have that on to be able to see the differences. So then this hover and hover fill is something I'm going to talk about. Hovering is something I'm going to talk about in the miscellaneous video. And there isn't really much of a difference that I can show you right now in the brush studio. So I'm going to leave that alone for now. When the miscellaneous video is done, I will go in here and kind of show you more about the brush studio. But this is where it's located, so just so you know. So I'm not going to go over that right now. But that is that. So I'm going to go back and go to monoline again. Reset this. Assistant Chaz is awake, so he's ornery. But anyway, so that was all that. Going to properties, we're going to talk about this stuff next. All right, so we're in properties. I have the monoline brush. So some of these have to do with how these look on the canvas. Some of them have to do with how they look in the brush library. So again, we're using the monoline brush, which is just a circle over and over again. So if I go back to shape, you see it's this circle. And use stamp preview. Let me keep it off for now. Let me show you. This is what this looks like in the brush library. I never cleared that off, but I will do that in a minute. But if you go to use stamp preview, what it's going to look like is it's going to show you that circle, because that's the stamp that's being stamped over and over and over in your stroke, in your brush, is that stamp. So this is showing you the shape that you have for your brush. And most of the brushes that come with Procreate don't have this stamp preview. Depends if you're making a brush, which is one of the brushes we're gonna make a couple versions of a stamp brush, where you just want to stamp something on the canvas rather than drag it along and make it a stroke altogether. This is something you'd probably want to use for your preview, because it's going to show you what that's going to look like stamped on. Now, some things that do have it are like the spray paint. You have that drip stamp. It's going to show you that and there's other properties you can change, and we're going to go through that when we do a stamp brush, where even if you drag the pencil along, it's not going to move out the stroke to make it like where there's a bunch of those in a row, where even if you drag the pencil across the canvas, it's just going to show you that one stamp. And I'm going to show you how to do that when we do a stamp brush. But this is it has a stamp preview. So if we go in here and we go to properties, see it says the use stamp preview is on. But if we were to turn that off, it's going to show you a bunch of those in a row. Or it's going to show you them all squished together, depending on other properties that you have that brush at. But that's why This only affects how it shows up in the library. It doesn't affect how it shows up on the canvas or anything like that. So if I go back to monoline where I was, it's still showing up as, because we haven't changed anything else, it's not just showing up as a stamp unless you just stamp it on there. But that's just showing how it shows up in the brush library. So that's what that is. Orient to screen is going to change how, I actually have to change the shape to do this. It's going to show you how it orients to the screen. I'm going to use the slim oval here just to show you that. So now it's not using a circle as a stroke, it's using, or as a stamp, it's using that oval shape. So the stamp preview, if you put that on, would show you that oval. And I should probably show you preview size max right now. But if you were to decrease it, it makes it smaller and smaller. Now this is a small shape to begin with, so it doesn't show you anything with none. And it all depends on the shape that you're starting with in your shape. Like you could possibly make that bigger if you had a bigger shape, but that one's a small one, if that makes sense. But that is just to show you again in the brush library how that's going to show up. Doesn't change the shape of your brush or the size of your brush on the canvas. It's just the preview size in the brush library. So then going back to orient to screen, this is going to change how, if you have that on, that shape, maybe I should space this out so you can see a little better. A little bit. It's going to show you that shape, even if you start like going this way, that shape is oriented this way on the screen always. And even if you change the rotation, it's always going to be of your canvas. It's always going to orient to that top of your iPad, basically, the screen. It's always going to be that same shape there, based on how you rotate the canvas. Now, if you turn that off, go in here, properties, turn it off, it's going to change based on how your canvas is rotated on the screen. There's going to be a lot of shapes on here, but like this is the original canvas the way it is, but you can rotate it. It's always going to be kind of oriented to that. So that's what that does. Now I'm going to reset this back to where it was with the circle and everything. Now smudge pull is based on the smudge brush. So I'm just going to put a stroke down. You would have to either pick that same brush. You would either have to pick that same brush with your smudge brush, but a quicker way to do that, and I went over this in the brushes, is you can hold this down and it says smudge with current brush, so now it has monoline. So this has to do, smudge pull has to do with that. So I'm gonna actually, I'm going to go into max and show you what it looks like with that. So you're smudging that. I didn't mean to do that, but you're smudging with this brush, you're pulling that stroke out. And you go down to like 75 and you're on the smudge brush. You can only go so far with the 75. I don't mean to do a quick shape, but you see, and then the further you decrease it, sorry, I'm meaning to go in with smudge. The further you decrease it, the less you're going to be able to show. I meant to do, that's close enough, 49. It's going to show up less and less. So this is how much smudge you want if you're using it as a smudge tool. And then, you know, bringing it all the way down, you're not going to be able to smudge anything. So that's how much you want to be able to smudge with a smudge if you're using it as a smudge brush. Max, you're going to be able to use it indefinitely. Like you're going to just be able to smudge and smudge and smudge. So that's why it's usually at like 75. So you can smudge a little bit, but it's not like unlimited. But you can put it wherever you want, but that's using it as a smudge brush. So that's what that was. I went over all of this brush behavior, maximum size, maximum opacity, and minimum opacity in my brush video. I'll do it again here, but I did go over this already. It's something I touched on in that video. But this has to do with the size of your brush. So I'm just going to show you. All right, let me erase this. This has to do, again, these sliders, this is size here, and this is opacity. So bringing it all the way down to 1 here, this is what 1% looks like right now. And then bringing it up to like 50-ish. This is what that looks like, and then bringing it all the way up, 100%. That's what that looks like. Now, that's because of the settings of the brush, that they don't really look that different. But if I put the maximum size down, doesn't let me go all the way down. All right, putting it at 2%, you're gonna see this is gonna change a little bit. Like it's hard. Not much of a difference. But it is there, so if you go, that wasn't exactly 50, but it was close to 50. So you can see that that is the maximum size, because maximum size is 2%. But if you bring it up to like, let's not go to max, but let's go to like 200. Now if you do the same with 1%, similar, then if you go to like 50, ish. You can see that's huge, and then you bring it up to 100, that's huge again. So you're changing the size, and this has to do with your minimum size as well. So your minimum, if you want your minimum, the absolute 0, depends on how like big you want that to be. So if I make minimum like 25%, and I go back to 1, you know, that's way different than it was over here, because you can have it set up where it can only be 25% is the minimum you can be on that brush. And then maximum, you can, you can increase that as much as you want. So this is if you want your brush, like if you were using it, whatever setting it was at to begin with, if you want it to be able to be bigger than it could possibly be on that slider, you would change that maximum size. And now, like the top of that slider is much bigger. I don't know why it's not showing up. Obviously, that's huge, especially on this canvas that I'm using. but you can change how big that brush can possibly be and how small it can possibly go. And then same with opacity. So this is maximum opacity, but if you don't want it to ever get to maximum capacity or opacity, you can change it. So let me erase all this. At full opacity, smaller brush size, you can see that it's not totally opaque because I had that maximum down. But if I, put it at max, then you can have maximum opacity there. And same with minimum. Like if you didn't want it to be completely transparent at 0, let's say at 20%, 21. So this is maximum and this would be minimum. So that's like 20% opacity rather than 0. So that's what that does. So again, you can play around with all these things depending on the size of your brush. And you can, another thing I like to do is, let me clear this out and reset. I like to duplicate brush. So if you take a brush and put it to the left, you can duplicate it and you can make one like a bigger version of that one. So like you can change that maximum size if you want it to be bigger. And that's like a bigger version of that one. So you can do that if you want. If you want to, instead of going in here and changing every time. So that's what you can do with the properties. Now materials has to do with that 3D, drawing aspect of Procreate that I don't really use, but this has to do with changing that stuff. So again, it's not something I deal with, but this is where that is located. Then about this brush, now there's going to be differences here between the ones that are made in Procreate and the ones you make yourself. So I'm going to show you that real quick. The only thing in here is you can reset. I did show you this at the beginning of this mini series. But if you make any changes to the brush, there's several ways to reset it. That was one way. You can reset it here by dragging it left, and then you can also reset it in the drawing pad, reset. So that's if you make any changes and you want to go back to the way it's exactly supposed to be. Now, if you either duplicate a brush like I just did, or if you hit this plus, you can create a brush on your own. So once you do that, this is like anything that has this stroke in it on the right is something that you're making changes to yourself, or you're making like a version of the brush yourself. And anything, we're going to talk about that when we make brushes, but you can make categories over here of your brushes, and they all have that stroke. But again, this is duplicating that brush, making changes. And since this is technically a new brush, you're just using a version of a Procreate brush to make it, you can now create, your version of the brush. So now we have different things here. So one is, there is a difference when you're duplicating brush versus making your own. So you see it says created on 11/2/22. That must be the last time that they made like a big change, a big update to Procreate. So if you're using a Procreate brush to duplicate and make changes to make your own brush, it's gonna always come up with like that date and that time. Versus if you're making your own, which I'm gonna show you next, it'll come up with today's date and today's time that you made it, because that's exactly when it was made. But you can put your own, name here. So Shannon. And then you could put your picture here if you wanted to, or like, your logo or whatever you want to make. And then you can also sign. So this is a way of protecting a brush you've made. Obviously, again, the date is wrong on here because that is one that you're making from a Procreate brush. But if you start with your own, you know, you can do that. Now another thing you can do is create a reset point. So once you make your brush the way you want it, you can create a reset point, and that will always reset back to, you know, the version that you want, even if you make changes to it later, or if someone else make changes to it, if you end up selling this or giving it to someone else. So I haven't made any changes, but let's change something. Let's change the size or something. Say that is the reset point I want. So now that if I change the size again, I'll be able to reset there. But anyway, that's what you do there. Oh my goodness, that looks crazy. All right, so that's what that does. Now, let me show you the difference between making your own brush. So hitting the plus, it's not gonna have any properties of any of those brushes. It's just gonna kind of have like a default version. It's gonna have a default shape and grain and everything. But now, under About This Brush, you see it has today's date, which is 5/11/23. That's when I'm filming this, and 2:23 p.m. That's when I'm filming it. So now it has the proper date, and you know, so it's a little more proper. This is when you made this brush, and then you know you can create your reset point again. But that is the difference there. Also, the other thing I didn't show you up here, it says Untitled Brush. You can change the name of your brush to whatever you want it to say. I'm just gonna put Shannon's brush because we haven't really done anything. I just want to show you that is what, so now if you go out, this is what it's called, Shannon's brush. But you can always change it if you want, just by going into Brush Studio. You can change the name, you know, you can duplicate, like I said before. You can create your reset point, but that's what's in there. That's what you can change there. So that is that. All right, so going into your brush library, I just want to show you a few things now. If you see, again, these little paint marks over here, these are all categories that I made for myself. I'm going to show you my SD logo, Shrush Design logo. So this is how when I was making my logo, how I kind of put it together. I just kind of made a bunch of flowers, little stamp brushes that I'm going to show you how to make again in another video. But, you know, so that I can just stamp them on the screen. So I have to actually, I should have kind of came in here and did the preview size, maybe made it a little smaller. Let's see. And it's still pretty big. That's a little better. So now you can see what that's supposed to be. Now that's the watermark you see on my videos, which I forgot to put on the part 1 video of this, but that's all right. But now you can kind of see a little better because I changed that. But this is like that I made the word part of the logo, the Shrush Design part, and I can make that bigger or smaller. But now I can stamp that wherever I want it, like whenever I'm making something else, or you know, I uploaded a version of that I made into a vector that I can make bigger and stuff too. But I started making it on here though. So, and then once I made it, I made a brush out of it so I could just stamp it anywhere. But that is, and then I did that with all these flowers as well, which come in my actual logo that I make. And I also have a version of thank you that I put occasionally. You've seen this on my videos too. My outro, it's on my outro of my normal videos, not my Procreate for Beginners videos, but my normal weekly videos that are supposed to come out every Wednesday but haven't been lately. But I have that, and then I've made that into other things. Like I have a little thank you card that I make for anything that I like make and ship to people. But that I made, you know, I made the lettering for this and then just made a stamp that I can just stamp on somewhere, make it very easy. So that is an example. Now some of these aren't actually supposed to be in this category. I I didn't organize them as well, but I've organized some of these into different. So these are my other brand that I'm starting up, that I was supposed to start up a long time ago, called Poise Pen Craft. I actually have the logo for that in here, I believe. Yeah. But you can see that I probably should have had that in here, but PP brushes, Poise Pen Craft brushes, are my brushes that I'm made for myself for making calligraphy. So that's my mono brush. It's a small pen brush. Now I haven't done a lot of these actually. I have to make a few more. Again, I haven't actually started this yet, but I'm getting there. But I'm going to be having like a calligraphy channel as well on YouTube and other stuff related to it. But you can see this Mono 1 and Mono 2, these are all like different sizes that I've made that I told you that you can kind of do versed on my Mono brush. And I don't have them labeled very well, but you know, that's kind of what I've done. And Halloween was when I did my little stamp brushes of these Halloween things that I made for one of my Halloween videos. But these are the different categories I have. Now you can actually like move things, or you can make a category if you want. There we go. If you all the way at the top, you can make your own category, and then you can just label it whatever you want. I'm gonna leave it as Untitled Set for now, just because now you can add brushes here, or you can actually grab a brush that you already have. So you can pick up one of these brushes if you wanted to, kind of pick it up and then try to drop it in whatever category you want. Now it should be in here. See, there it is. But you can also grab it and with another finger hit whatever category you want. This one's a little easier, and then just let it go. If you end up moving any of these categories, pencils or pens or brushes from the Procreate categories, what it's going to do, it'll duplicate the brush and put it in whatever category you want. So if there's a brush that you use often from Procreate that you want to kind of be able to find quicker, or like your common Procreate brushes or whatever, you could put your own category and do that, but it's a duplicate. So you can see that technical pencil is still here where it's supposed to be. And this is a duplicate version in your Untitled set that I put there. And you can, again, anytime it has this swoosh in the, I keep saying swoosh, this paint mark in the upper right corner of the brush, or in these categories, these are all, that means that it's either a brush you've duplicated that you're making changes to yourself, or it's one that you've created your own, versus the ones that have actual icons for the Procreate and they don't have that paint mark in the top corner. So that's what that means. Anyway, that was just a duplicate. I'm going to delete it. Right? Yeah, there we go. All right. So that was that. Now, if you want to pick up multiple things, you can grab this, and after you hover with it, you can hit this plus sign and you can kind of add things to it, like whatever you're hovering above. And you can add all those things to your little, collection you have here, and then you can put them wherever you want. Again, I'm going to do it the easy way. There we go. But that's how you can kind of organize your brushes. Or you can grab them like this, like you do with layers. Grab them all together and then put them back in Halloween where they belong. I'm not sure what happened. I somehow lost my skull one that I had, but that's fine. When I was picking it up, I don't know what happened to it. I don't think I deleted it, but apparently I must have, because I don't see it, but that's fine. Like I said, I don't really need that. I don't really need any of those Halloween ones. I just made them quickly for a video I was making. But that's how you organize those. So, not sure if there's anything else I want to say about that. Yeah, but that is it. So we are done with the brush studio now. Again, I didn't really go over the 3D part of it because I don't go over that. And then the hover thing I'm going to talk about when we talk about hover in the miscellaneous video. So I'll come back to that then. But that is basically the brush studio. You've made it through all 3 parts. Congratulations if you watched all 3 videos. But anyway, we're going to start making our own brushes in the next couple of videos. So I'll see you then. Okay, we made it through the brush studio videos. So all 3 parts. So now the next thing we're going to do is make a few brushes together. I don't know how many of these videos are going to come out yet, but there'll be a few of them where I tell you how to make different kinds of brush. Now, I'm not going to go through every possible brush you could make. We're going to do kind of more simpler ones, but if you're interested in, giving you at least a jump start on how to make certain types of brushes, you can always tweak them to your liking, obviously. And you can go off on your own and use what you've learned in the brush studio and make whatever you want to make. So, but these are to give you kind of an idea of what you can do. So we're going to be doing those next. Few videos like that. Then next big thing we're going to do is look at the animation assist feature, which is how you can make animations through Procreate. And then we're going to be doing similarly a couple animations together. And then I have my miscellaneous video that has, again, everything else that we haven't really touched on very much, at least, other than some of them I did touch on in my intro video. But like all the background kind of stuff and stuff that didn't fit in any other category. A lot of it's in the settings menu or the gallery. So like importing, exporting, and different settings you can change. And I'll go over again how to make your own canvas and things like that. Those kind of background things are going to be in that miscellaneous video. And then we will be officially done with this series of deep dives on all of the different topics in Procreate. Again, I mentioned this before, I'm not really touching on very much that 3D aspect of Procreate. That was something that was new in the last major update and something that I played around with it a little bit, but I never really use it myself, so I don't feel comfortable teaching that. But I can kind of touch on it a little bit in my miscellaneous video. But anyway, after all of that is done, we will have gone through basically everything in the app, at least up to this point. They might do another major update, and I'm going to have to update all these videos. But as far as I know, they don't have any big ones coming up yet. So, we're going to start doing projects, like I said, where they're a little more practical, and they show you how to use several of these things together rather than looking at them separately. So you're going to start learning a little more how you can use Procreate to make your own things that you want to make, your own art, your own creativity. So these are all kind of designed as a jump start for you to make your own things. I don't want to limit you in what I make. So that's how those are kind of going to be. And they're coming up very soon. But that's it for this video, so I will see you in the next series of videos, which we're going to make our own brushes, like I said. So see you then.